we will discuss the role that placemaking can play in creating long-term value in large-scale development projects. And to do so, we will draw from our experience in different social housing districts in Milan. So as you already introduced us, so that part is done. And what we do in our work is that we are active as a promoter of the social housing sector in Italy and as technical and social advisor to the funds that invest in social housing in the country. And so our activities are quite diverse and cover all the dimensions of social housing projects. So from urban planning and architecture to financial analysis and to community engagement, service design and neighborhood development. So maybe a clarification that is useful to do is that when we talk about social housing in the Italian context, we can go to the next slide, maybe. We refer to a mix of apartments, services, tools, and financial instruments that are dedicated to a specific portion of the population. We call this portion a gray area that you can see indicated in this graph. And this means that social housing is focusing on providing an answer to the demand for affordable housing of those who cannot afford an adequate housing solution in the private market, but at the same time do not qualify for public housing, which in Italy, unluckily, is a very small portion of the housing stock. So either they don't qualify or they stay on a waiting list for a very long time. So, and the other important element is that with social housing, we refer not only to an affordable housing option, but to a high quality one. And the way the social housing system works in Italy and is financed is through a system of integrated ethical real estate funds, which was set up in 2009 after a phase of experimentation. And the system has as the main investor Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, which is a major investment bank working under the Ministry of Economics and Finance in Italy. And the fund is structured in one national fund supported by CDP and other investors. And this fund is then divided into local regional funds, which in turn are participated by different kind of investors at local level. So maybe banking foundations or local administrations or territorial agencies. And through this system, we are able to provide not only an affordable housing option to those who need it, but also to promote a different new culture of living, which is based on collaboration. So as you will see in all the examples we will share later, in our projects, we try to go beyond the single apartment and we create both the physical spaces and the occasions for the community to meet, to come together and to self-organize to improve the quality of life in the neighborhood. So we do this by adopting an integrated approach to planning, which has a focus on different dimensions, which overlap and are integrated also in the time frame where they develop. And so we focus on financial elements, on architecture and urban planning, but also on social aspects, and then on the social management of the project once the architectural part is completed. So this approach was at the basis of, is at the basis of all the social housing projects we have all over Italy. We have a specific focus in Milan because it's where we started with our first projects in 2013. But now there are projects all over the country, and all the projects have their peculiar features. They're designed according to the needs and the characteristics of the area. But there are some general features that you can see here, which characterize all the social housing districts. And they are, for example, a mix of affordable housing options, so with different rent, sale, rent to buy formula. Usually more than 50% is affordable rent, but there are all these other options. And then there is a portion of the housing units which is dedicated to residential services for more fragile targets, or which are managed by third sector organizations usually. And there is also a strong focus on designing the public spaces and the semi-public and semi-private areas and the pedestrian paths so that outdoor life and encounters are facilitated and can happen naturally. There are common spaces dedicated to the residents' activities, and there is a mix of local urban services and commercial activities that populate the ground floor and are also open to the external neighborhood. And we also have a community startup path, which involves the residents in co-designing collaborative activities for the neighborhood. So this approach to planning that we have is quite in line with the different dimensions of placemaking that you're all very familiar with, which are the hardware, software, and the hardware dimension. So we focus on one side on designing the neighborhood from an architectural point of view. So focusing on designing the ground floor, the common areas, making sure that it's accessible, that there are urban connections, that there is a good perception of security and a hybridization of activities. And then we focus as a second dimension on community engagement. So we try to create the conditions for the community of inhabitants to develop and activate together the common spaces in the complex, and with activities that can bring benefits to the whole community. And on a third level, we work at neighborhood level with different local stakeholders to build networks and partnership and to enrich the provision of social, cultural, recreational activities in the neighborhood. So as you can imagine, placemaking plays a very central role in all of our projects. And the way we see placemaking is as a collaborative process through which physical, cultural, and the social identity of the districts are enhanced. And this process has different objectives. So on one side, we focus on positioning the project within a broader cultural district. So opening a dialogue with other cultural institutions at city level and bringing cultural activities to districts that often are quite peripheral. Also, we focus on using the project as an incubator for new innovative services or commercial activities that can be tested and then can become part of the final project. And we also make sure that the redevelopment is integrated with the existing neighborhood. And so we work with local stakeholders and inhabitants, and we try to maximize the social value of the project and to increase neighborhood development. And additionally, as with social housing, we're usually dealing with urban regeneration projects on a large scale, developing on a quite broad time frame. And as Hans was saying before, we also learned through experience that it's important to focus on placemaking throughout the different stages of the project. So before the construction begins, throughout the construction, but also once the project is active and needs to be managed on a more daily basis. And we focus on different kind of activities, which can be temporary in nature. So maybe focusing only on a small period or having a specific once in a time uses. Or we also have transitory uses, which we use to experiment activities and services that are already envisaged by the master plan. And through experimentation, we can also redesign them and better adjust them to the context. And in all these kind of activities, we work, again, both with local neighborhood partners and with supra-local partners. And in practice, this means a lot of things that we'll show you by focusing on 3 different projects in Milan. And I let Valentina take the floor.
Thank you, Francesca. And what does all of this means in practice? And today we want you to show you some examples coming from Milan. which is the city where we are based and where the experimentation of social housing began in the first place. We will focus on 3 cases of Cenni di Cambiamento, Borgo Sostenibile Figino, and Redo Merezzate. And here you can see a small overview of the projects in numbers. They have different size, but they all present the general features that we saw above. A mix of housing typologies and options, from rent to buy, and affordable sale, to rent to residential service for fragile targets, and a mix of common spaces for the residents, services, commercial activities, and urban functions open to the neighborhood that populate the ground floor. When talking about social housing in Italy, we simply have to start with Cenni di Cambiamento, which is the first neighborhood developed in Milan by Redo SGR, with the support of Fondazione Housing Sociale, and a sort of manifesto project for the social housing model. In 2008, when we started working on this project, social and collaborative housing issues were niche topics in Italy, but the impact of the financial crisis and the loss in families' buying power generated a growing awareness of the need to have more affordable housing options and new ways of living based on sharing and collaboration. And in this scenario is that Cenni di Cambiamento was developed with the goal to provide concrete and appropriate answers in terms of both urban and residential space, of new ways of living and new technologies, and of integration and participation. One important element of innovation is to be found in the architectural design, selected through an international public competition. The competition asked for a design that would give value to open spaces as a resource to be designated as services, social interaction, and as meeting points, while also maintaining different degrees of semi-public and semi-private spaces. This resulted in a design structure around an open central courtyard in which local urban services and shops are concentrated, and a more enclosed area with green spaces closer to the residential units, giving a sense of privacy. And to multiply the possibility of social interaction within the settlement, a single pedestrian path was designed, connecting green areas, spaces for kids, a variety of services and urban functions, so that all the internal destinations are reachable through the interior courtyard. And as this idea of social housing was something new at the time, the project had to be promoted in order to reach the target population. And for this reason, we participated in different local events, such as the ethical and sustainable fair Fa la Cosa Giusta, where we had the opportunity to present Cenni di Cambiamento and building a lot of interest, not only in the affordable housing offer, but also in the collaborative lifestyle. And another innovative element of the project is the community startup path, a series of meetings and labs aimed at facilitating encounters and collaboration among residents, who get to define the use of communal spaces in the project together, and to organize activities that are beneficial for the community of residents and for the neighborhood. This path begins with meetings where the inhabitants simply get to know each other, share their interests and passions, start thinking about what they would like to do together, and while also sharing a meal or during a light convivial moment. Continuing with the path, the community becomes closer and stronger, and after around a year of experimentation, residents generally set up a neighborhood association to directly manage the common spacing according to the needs and the desires of the community. Alongside working with the community of residents, We also built a strong network with stakeholders active at the local and also urban level in the social cultural field. And we try to build a mix of services, activities, and events with them that contribute to enriching the social and cultural offers available in the area, making sure that the project becomes an important part of the urban issue. And these photos, you can see an event organized with the citywide festival Piano City. One good example of our way of working is the choice of to repurpose the old farm, Cascina in Italian, to Mare Culturale Urbana, which is a hybrid cultural center that brings social, cultural, and recreational activities to the area, engaging the local community, both in the creation and in the participation of cultural events, and at the same time providing employment opportunities to disadvantaged targets.
And so for the second example, we will move to another area of Milan, which, as you can see in the map, is located in the western fringe of the city. So the project that we are focusing on is Borgo Sostenibile, which we see as a bigger cousin of Cene di Cambiamento, because the two projects were developed around the same time with a similar approach to planning that we described before. But as you can see, this project is on a bigger scale. It has 3 times the residents of Cene, and it also has a bigger proportion of commercial spaces and local services. So this project consisted in the transformation of an area located in a part of the city where the urban environment somehow fades into the countryside. And so you can see it in this photo. So in designing the project's concept, we focused on integrating the social housing complex within the local context. So both with the historical village that you can see on the left of the photo, which was characterized of a compact urban fabric and low or mid-rise buildings. And then at the same time, there was an integration with the system of parks and agricultural areas that is located in this part of the city. And by focusing on the local context, we were able to also build the conditions for a positive interaction between the existing neighborhood and the new development. And in this project too, we focused on the community startup path. So the residents got together through a series of encounters and labs, and they spent time together and they started co-designing collaborative activities. And at the end of the path, they set up an association, as also happened in Cene, to manage together the common spaces. And alongside with activating the community, we focus a lot on working with a rich network of partners, which can be third sector organizations or non-profit service providers, or also small neighborhood shopkeepers. And we build a network and we make sure that the ground floor of the project and the common areas are always alive with different services and spaces, and that these services contribute to improving the daily lives of residents. And in the case of Figino, this mix of services includes, for example, a social bookshop, which you can see in these photos, with a cafe, and then a language school, a stationery shop, a daily center for the elderly, with also a community hub and a co-working space. And there is a center for kids with autism, or a bar with a mini market, supermarket, and then a mix of commercial activities such as pizza place and restaurants, a photography studio, a hairstylist, and a beauty center. And so as you can see, the mix is quite rich. And in building these, we usually start in every project from an analysis of the area, of what's missing, and of what the neighborhood would need. And we prioritize usually the proposals that come from small local entrepreneurs, which are connected to the territory. And we prioritize ideas that can bring something new and needed to the area. And so, as these are often new entrepreneurs with not so much experience, we also support them in the startup phase of their businesses. We help them making sure that it can be sustained through time. And as you can see from these photos, it's the result of this is a network of stakeholders that collaborate with each other and organize activities together, keeping the public spaces of the neighborhood always quite alive. And so organizing festival events, offering entertainment activities, keeping the shops open extra hours. And this is possible just because of this work that we do with them from the beginning. And we can then move into the next project.
Yeah, for the third examples, we bring you to the southeast of Milan, in an area located next to one of the main train stations of the city, which is currently undergoing deep transformation, with the business center and new residential districts coming up. Merezzate is one of the new social housing districts of Milan, and it has been inhabited since 2020. And as you can see from the map, the district develops on a bigger scale if compared to Ceni and Borgo Sostenibile. It has 615 apartments. And in this way, it can be seen as a small neighborhood in itself. And this scale is also evident when we look at the public spaces of the project, which were developed around the central promenade that connects a series of smaller paths leading to courts, to courtyards, shared spaces, green areas, commercial activities, local services, and sport field. In this photo, we begin to see the public spaces going from empty to populated with activities after the arrival of the community of residents and after the beginning of the startup path, which in this project unfortunately began in times of COVID. And this meant that working on collaborative activities and community engagement was very challenging, but also extremely necessary to avoid the rise of social isolation in a new neighborhood in which people did not know each other. And the scale of the project also made it important to work with a diverse network of stakeholders and institutional partners active at local, but also at the city level, to enrich the area with an offer of cultural, educational, and entertainment activities directed to the residents of the district and to the surrounding area. To do so, we worked with multiple partners, focusing on topics such as sustainability, green and circular economy, and culture more widely. And we brought a rich selection of events in Merezzate. This resulted in a wide range of activities for all, from gardening workshops to singing performances, from training on the circular economy and consumption to screenings of movies selected by the residents, from theater plays promoted by well-known cultural institutions such as the Piccolo Theater, up until the development of art residency, engaging the residents in a path of research and co-production of final performance and much more. So what we presented is just a series of examples that we hope gave you an idea of what it means for us to create social and collaborative housing. And even if we didn't use the word placemaking much in describing our activities, you probably saw in how many ways placemaking is present and what we do. And indeed, until recently, we didn't use the term placemaking or place-led development in describing our work, but we became aware that it represents a fundamental dimension of our work, and we are now trying to look at it in a more structured way, working on placemaking strategies to make sure that in our projects we are able to create long-term value by activating the local community and territory. And now this is when we give you the floor back to all of you, to your observation and questions. And we also would like to throw in as a starting point of discussion a question that we addressed a lot in our practice, namely how to maintain the activation and momentum through time, and how to make sure that placemaking generates a long-term value for neighborhood and communities. So thank you very much for hosting us.